They pleaded with the stars. Then the Deathworlders arrived. The stars were silent, cold, and endless. From the bridge of the capital ship Luminaris, Admiral Creel stared at the blinking lights of the galaxy, feeling a weight heavier than gravity itself. His species, the Virelians, had ruled their corner of the galaxy for centuries. They were known for their wisdom, their patience, and their careful diplomacy. But diplomacy had failed. The enemy had come. They were called the Cravari, a force unlike anything the Virelians had faced before. Ships larger than cities moved with precision, weapons that could melt entire planets, and crews that fought without hesitation. Entire star systems had fallen in weeks. Creel's fleet was among the last to resist. He looked around the bridge at officers who had served their people for decades. Their faces were pale, not from fear, but from exhaustion. "We cannot win," muttered one officer quietly, almost ashamed to speak. Creel did not answer at once. He had felt the same hopelessness, the same despair, yet he knew that even in the shadow of defeat, there was one thing left to do. "Then we must call for help," he said finally, his voice steady. "If the stars will not hear us, we will send our plea into them. Perhaps someone somewhere will answer." The officers exchanged worried glances. "There is no one left," said another. "The great empires, the neighboring systems, they will not help. They fear the Cravari." Even sending a message might invite their wrath. Creel's eyes hardened. "We do not send it for the cowardly. We send it for those who can rise, for those who can face impossible odds. If they do not come, then we fall knowing we tried." The Virelians worked tirelessly for hours. They crafted the message, a beacon encoded with every detail of the Cravari's fleet, their tactics, and the dire state of the Virelian worlds. The message was sent into deep space, aimed at the uncharted regions, the places beyond known star maps, where no civilization had yet heard of their plight. As the transmission launched, the Luminaris shuddered. A subtle vibration ran through the hull, as if the ship itself understood the risk they were taking. Every Virelian on board felt a shiver of uncertainty. They were alone in the vastness of space, sending their hope into the void, praying that someone, anyone, would hear. Meanwhile, far from the Virelian worlds, beyond the familiar stars of the central galaxy, life moved differently. On a planet named Karos, storms lashed the surface daily. Lightning split the sky, winds tore across jagged mountains, and rivers of molten rock twisted through valleys. It was a harsh world, unwelcoming, where only the strongest survived. And yet it was here that the humans thrived. They called themselves many things, but the galaxy would one day know them as the Deathworlders. Karos shaped them. Every storm, every quake, every predator had forced them to adapt. From birth, humans learned to endure. From childhood, they trained their minds and bodies. Weakness did not survive. On this storm-torn world, the distress signal arrived without warning. It was faint at first, like a whisper through static, but the human sensors caught it immediately. The command center of Karos, a fortress built into the mountains, lit up with alerts. Lieutenant Mara Voss, young but sharp-eyed, was the first to recognize the significance. "Sir, you need to see this," she said, handing the console over to the commander. "It's not local traffic. This is ancient, encoded in a way we've never seen, and it's pleading for help." Commander Jerk Thorne frowned. He was a man molded by hardship, with scars that told the story of every battle he had survived. He leaned over the console, watching the streams of data translate the Virelians' message. Entire worlds were at risk. A ruthless enemy had conquered dozens of star systems. The Virelians, proud and noble, were among the last to resist. Jerk did not hesitate. "Send it to the High Council," he said. "This is serious. This is a call that deserves attention." The High Council of Karos had long debated whether to engage with the wider galaxy. Humanity was feared, yes, but they were also respected for surviving where no one else could. Their fleets were fast, their tactics unpredictable, and their resilience unmatched. Some argued that responding to a distant plea could be dangerous, drawing the wrath of enemies they could barely understand. Others argued that honor and opportunity were worth the risk. Hours later, the council convened. The chamber was stark, metallic, and functional, with panoramic windows revealing the endless storm outside. Lightning illuminated the council members' faces. Jerk stood before them, presenting the transmission. "This message comes from the Virelian species," he said. "They are under attack by a force called the Cravari. Their technology is advanced, their numbers overwhelming. They have lost everything, and now they ask for help." A council member spoke next, his voice cautious. Commander, the galaxy already fears humans. To intervene could escalate conflict. The Kravari might notice us and we could become a target. Jerk's gaze did not waver. Or, we could prevent a massacre. They are pleading for help. This is not a call for conquest. It is a cry for survival. Humanity has faced Deathworlds before. We have survived. We can help them. Mara added, the Violians are intelligent, strategic. They are not desperate without reason. Their message carries truth. We must consider the possibility that if we act, we save thousands of lives. The council debated long into the night. Storms raged outside, thunder shaking the walls. Finally, after hours of deliberation, the decision was made. Humanity would answer the plea. Ships were ordered to mobilize. Fleets that had slept in hidden bays for decades now roared to life. The Deathworlders were coming. Meanwhile, on the Luminaris, Admiral Creel received no immediate reply. Days turned into weeks. Morale was low, the Kravari's attacks grew closer, and hope seemed to fade. Officers began to whisper about the futility of their choice, but Creel refused to despair. Even if the stars do not answer, he said quietly to his first officer, we have sent our plea. That alone is worth something. Perhaps someone will come. Then, without warning, sensors picked up distant blips. At first, they seemed like static anomalies, small points moving in the blackness. But as they approached, the crew realized what they were seeing. Ships unlike any they had ever known, built for survival, fast and agile. They moved with coordination that spoke of intelligence and discipline. The Violians had never seen humans before, but somehow the legends were true. The galaxy had whispered about Deathworlders, feared them as monsters of survival, beings who could endure anything. And now these beings were coming to their aid. The first human ships entered the Violian sector with calm precision. They did not attack, they did not boast. They simply positioned themselves between the Violians and the advancing Kravari. Their weapons were ready, but their eyes were on strategy, not destruction. On the bridge of the Luminaris, Admiral Creel felt a strange mix of awe and relief. They came, he whispered, almost in disbelief. They actually came. Commander Jerk Thorne, aboard the lead human ship, studied the Violian fleet through his scanners. He could see fear, exhaustion, and hope. Humans did not rush forward blindly. They were patient, calculating, and prepared. Prepare to engage if necessary, he ordered, but do not fire unless fired upon. Our first act is to protect. The Violians watched in silence. They had never imagined such creatures could exist, let alone come to their aid. The legends, the stories passed down in whispered warnings across the galaxy, were real. The Deathworlders were here. That night, the stars seemed to shine differently. On Karos, lightning illuminated the ships preparing for departure. Across the void, the Luminaris crew felt the first true spark of hope in weeks. Somewhere, in the vast darkness of space, humanity had answered a desperate plea, proving that even in the deepest shadow, hope could arrive on strong, steady wings. And as the Kravari fleet moved closer, unaware of the new force waiting for them, the galaxy began to change, silently, without a single shot fired. The first part of this story ends with anticipation and tension. The Deathworlders have arrived, but the battle is only beginning. The Violians have hope, the humans have purpose, and the stars are watching. The Violian fleet had never seen anything like it. From the bridge of the Luminaris, Admiral Creel studied the approaching human ships with a mix of fear and amazement. They were not large, at least not compared to the massive Kravari vessels that had already destroyed dozens of worlds. Yet the humans moved with a quiet strength, their formations precise, their speed unmatched. Every movement suggested careful planning, every course chosen with intent. The legends of humanity, whispered in terrified tones across the galaxy, had reached the Violians' ears long before they ever expected to meet them. Humans were called Deathworlders, survivors of impossible worlds where no other species could endure. They were said to have the endurance of beasts, the cunning of predators, and the courage of those who faced death every day. Creel had dismissed these stories as exaggerations. Now he understood they were real. On the lead human ship, Commander Jerk Thorne observed the Violian fleet through a series of layered sensors. Unlike most species, humans did not rely on sheer firepower alone. They studied their enemies, learned their weaknesses, and struck with precision. They would not rush forward blindly, they would protect, not destroy. And yet, Jerk knew that their presence alone could change everything. Keep the fleet tight, he instructed his captains. Do not engage unless necessary. Let the Virelians see that we are here to defend, not conquer. Lieutenant Mara Voss, his second-in-command, looked at the scanners. They are watching us, she said. You can feel it. The Virelians, they don't know whether to trust or fear us. Jerk nodded. Let them watch. Fear is a tool, so is hope. We must show them both. Meanwhile, in the Alien Alliance's command center on the planet Sira Prime, panic had not subsided. The Virelians relayed every movement of the Cravari, every tactic, and every fleet deployment. For decades, the Alliance had relied on diplomacy, careful negotiations, and defensive technologies. None of it had prepared them for this scale of attack. Now, with humans arriving, the tide of hope began to stir. Admiral Creel requested a direct communication channel. Open a link to the human flagship, he said. The channel blinked green and a holographic figure appeared in the bridge room. Jerk Thorne's presence was calm, his expression neutral yet commanding. Admiral Creel, Jerk said, we have received your plea. Humanity answers. Tell me your priorities. We will protect your fleet and your worlds. The Virelians exchanged stunned looks. They had expected demands, threats, perhaps even a price. Instead, this human simply asked for direction. Creel's voice shook slightly with relief. We need your help. The Cravari are relentless. They will destroy everything we have. Please, we cannot hold them alone. Jerk nodded as if confirming something to himself. We understand. We will hold them back. But know this, we do not fight for glory. We fight because it is necessary. Follow our lead and your species may survive. Across the Virelian fleet, murmurs filled the corridors. Officers whispered among themselves. Humanity, these Deathworlders, had arrived not as conquerors but as saviors. The idea seemed impossible. How could a species from an unknown, harsh world protect them from the Cravari? Yet the calm confidence of the humans inspired hope where despair had reigned. The first confrontation came sooner than expected. Sensors picked up a Cravari scout fleet approaching at high velocity. Unlike the humans, the Cravari were aggressive, arrogant, and confident that their victory was inevitable. The scout ships were lightly armed but fast, designed to probe defenses, identify weaknesses, and report back. Jerk ordered the fleet into formation. Do not fire unless fired upon, he reminded his officers. We protect first, we attack second. The Cravari scouts closed in, their weapons systems locked. The Virelians tensed, unsure whether the humans would engage. Then, unexpectedly, the humans executed a maneuver no one had anticipated. They split into multiple, smaller units, each weaving between the stars, disappearing and reappearing with perfect coordination. The scouts, unable to predict their movements, fired blindly, wasting their energy on empty space. It was not just their speed or agility that confounded the enemy, it was their discipline. Every human unit moved in concert, adjusting instantly to every threat, covering each other, protecting the Virelian ships as if they were part of their own fleet. From the Luminaris bridge, Creel could hardly believe his eyes. They fight differently, he whispered. Not with brute force, with control. The scouts retreated, reporting only confusion back to the main Cravari fleet. The Virelians cheered quietly. They had seen humans for the first time in action, and it was awe-inspiring. Later, when the fleet regrouped, Creel asked the human commander a question that had been on his mind since the humans arrived. Why come to help us? You are far from your home, and these invaders are dangerous. Jerk's response was simple, almost blunt. Because some things are worth protecting, because survival matters, and because the galaxy is bigger than one species. We do not act for glory, Admiral. We act for necessity, for what must be done. The words hung in the air, striking the Virelians in a way no speech had ever done before. Humanity, it seemed, had a philosophy of strength, resilience, and purpose that the galaxy had never encountered. As days passed, the human fleet moved steadily into the system. They studied the Cravari patterns, analyzed their strengths, and prepared defenses that the Virelians had never considered. Small squads of human pilots patrolled asteroid fields, creating unpredictable obstacles for the enemy. Heavy human cruisers positioned themselves near vulnerable planets, acting as mobile shields. In the Virelian command room, analysts stared at the humans' data. Their tactics, they do not match any known strategy, said one officer. They combine defense and offense, yet they never overcommit. They are perfect, Creel nodded. They are from a world that is perfect in no way. They survive where nothing else can. That is why they are unmatched. Outside the Viorlian worlds, the Cravari fleet began to notice the difference. Their attacks, once overwhelming, now failed to achieve decisive results. Human squadrons struck with precision, retreating before the enemy could respond. Planetary defenses, guided by humans, held firm. The invaders, arrogant and confident, found themselves frustrated, unable to predict or overcome this new factor in the battlefield. On Karos, the human crews rested briefly. Myra Voss walked along the deck of her ship, looking at the stars. "They think they are alone," she said softly. "They think no one will help, and yet here we are. This is what it means to be human, to face impossible odds and still move forward." Jerk watched her, silent for a moment. "We are not heroes," he said. "We are necessary, and sometimes that is enough." The humans continued their advance, learning more about the Cravari every day. They discovered patterns, weaknesses, and predictable behaviors in the enemy that no one else had noticed. Small victories accumulated, not loud or celebrated, but crucial. Every saved planet, every intercepted fleet strengthened hope across the Viorlian worlds. By the end of the second week, the Viorlians began to speak openly of the humans not as mysterious saviors, but as allies they could trust. The fear that had dominated their hearts since the Cravari's arrival began to fade, replaced with admiration, respect, and something they had almost forgotten: confidence. For the first time in months, Admiral Creel allowed himself a faint smile. Humanity, the Deathworlders, had arrived, and they had not come to conquer. They had come to endure, protect, and inspire. And yet, despite the successes, the humans remained cautious. They knew the Cravari were powerful, relentless, and unpredictable. This was only the beginning. Battles would come. Sacrifices would be necessary. But the galaxy now had a new variable, one that no one could ignore. The Deathworlders had arrived, and the stars themselves seemed to lean toward their side. As the human fleet settled into position near the outer planets of the Viorlian system, Jerk Thorne issued one final order for the day. "Prepare for anything. Learn everything. Protect those who cannot protect themselves. We do not act for glory. We act for survival, and for the chance to make the galaxy a place worth living." Somewhere far away in the shadows of the void, the Cravari watched. They had expected the Viorlians to fall easily, as had all others before. But now a new force had appeared, unlike any they had seen. A force that endured where others would break. A force that inspired hope instead of fear. And as the stars burned silently above, both friend and enemy understood the same truth: something had changed. The galaxy would never be the same. The Viorlian worlds had grown quiet in the hours before the storm. The Cravari fleet, massive and ruthless, loomed at the edge of the system like a dark shadow. Their numbers alone could crush the Viorlians, and their technology was unmatched in raw power. Yet the humans, the Deathworlders, moved with a strange confidence that unsettled the enemy. Commander Jerk Thorne stood on the bridge of his flagship, resolute, watching the approaching fleet. His officers worked with calm precision, relaying sensor data, calculating trajectories, and predicting enemy maneuvers. Every ship in the human fleet followed his orders without hesitation, as if instinct and discipline were one. "Scouts report the Cravari advance is forming in wedge formation," Lieutenant Mara Voss said. Her eyes never left the holographic display. "They expect us to panic, to scatter, to be predictable. They do not understand what humans are capable of." Jerk nodded. "Then let them learn," he said quietly. "Hold position, wait for their move, observe, then we strike." From the Viorlian flagship Luminaris, Admiral Creel observed the humans with awe. He had never commanded a fleet alongside anyone like them. Humans were strange, unpredictable, and yet completely in control of their actions. They did not charge recklessly. They did not seek glory. They simply adapted. And adaptation, Creel realized, was far more dangerous than brute force. The Cravari opened the battle with a salvo of energy blasts. Massive beams of blue and green light streaked across space, targeting Viorlian planets and ships. Explosions lit up the void. For a moment, it seemed the Cravari had the upper hand, but the humans did not panic. Smaller human fighters darted between the beams, weaving and dodging in patterns that seemed impossible. Heavy cruisers shifted position, creating shields for vulnerable ships and drawing enemy fire. Every attack the Cravari launched was met with precise counters. The human fleet moved like a single organism, each part protecting the whole. On the surface of the Viorlian homeworld, civilians watched the sky in fear. Yet hope stirred in their hearts as human ships intercepted enemy strikes. Entire cities were spared destruction. Humanity's presence gave them courage they had not felt in months. Lieutenant Voss observed the battle from her fighter. "They're trying to flank us," she said, pointing to a cluster of Kravari ships moving around the human formation. "If we don't act, they could reach the planets." Jerk's response was calm. "Divide our forces. Split into 3 wings, draw them into the center where our cruisers can cover them. Remember, defense first, precision always." The maneuver was executed flawlessly. The Kravari, expecting panic, found themselves surrounded by human fighters. They fired, but the humans were already elsewhere. Explosions in empty space made the enemy think they had scored hits, but in reality, no human ship was harmed. From the Luminaris bridge, Admiral Creel could hardly believe it. "They are not just fighting," he whispered. "They are teaching the enemy to fail." Meanwhile, in the Kravari command ship, General Korak growled in frustration. "These humans, they are not like anyone we have fought. They are fast, clever, and coordinated. Every plan we make fails." Back in the human fleet, the battle continued for hours. Human squads executed daring maneuvers that protected Violian planets, intercepted enemy reinforcements, and even captured small Kravari craft for study. Their tactics were unfamiliar to the Violians, yet undeniably effective. One group of human fighters, led by Lieutenant Voss herself, approached a vulnerable planet where a Kravari strike team had begun orbital bombardment. She ordered a daring interception. "We move in tight formation, disrupt their weapons, shield the planet. Remember, never overcommit." The humans moved like shadows, fast and precise. Kravari ships were hit with EMP pulses that disabled their systems temporarily. Human fighters used gravitational anomalies to force enemy craft into awkward trajectories, preventing them from firing accurately. Within minutes, the orbital bombardment was neutralized, the enemy ships retreating in confusion. On the planet below, Violians looked up at the sky, seeing the humans in action. Children pointed, adults wept quietly, and soldiers whispered of a legend they had never believed in. The Deathworlders were real, and they fought for them. The Kravari grew desperate. They sent in heavier ships, massive vessels armed with destructive energy beams designed to annihilate anything in their path. The humans did not falter. Instead, they adapted once more. Heavy human cruisers positioned themselves between the Kravari weapons and the planets, their hulls absorbing blasts that would have destroyed ordinary ships. Commander Jerk Thorne coordinated the defense from the Resolute. "Focus on defense first," he ordered. "Predict, intercept, and counter. Protect the weak. We do not fight for glory, we fight to survive and protect." The strategy worked. Entire Kravari squadrons found themselves unable to reach the Violian worlds. Their attacks became chaotic, uncoordinated. Humans intercepted reinforcements before they could join the main fleet. The Kravari, for the first time in history, began to doubt their inevitable victory. On the Luminaris, Admiral Creel stood before his crew. "The humans, they fight like the storms of their world. Relentless yet controlled. This is more than hope. This is survival itself." The human tactics continued to surprise. Small units used asteroid fields to their advantage, creating unpredictable obstacles. Enemy ships were trapped, forced into positions where they could be neutralized. Every strike, every move demonstrated discipline and intelligence beyond what the Violians had imagined. By the end of the first full day of battle, the Kravari fleet had suffered significant losses. Ships that were once thought unstoppable were destroyed or forced to retreat. The humans had protected Violian planets with minimal losses of their own. Lieutenant Voss reported to Jerk. "They expected us to panic, to flee, or to attack recklessly. They did not expect this. They do not understand humans." Jerk nodded, his face calm but eyes sharp. "No enemy does until it is too late. Remember, we fight not for glory, but because it must be done. That is our strength." The Violians, watching from their planets and ships, whispered among themselves. "They are unlike any we have known, stronger than the strongest, clever than the wisest. Perhaps they are what the galaxy has been waiting for." Yet the battle was far from over. The Kravari still had numbers, technology, and ruthlessness. They were not defeated, only delayed. Jerk knew the true test was ahead. The humans would have to continue adapting, sacrificing, and protecting if they wanted to change the fate of the Violian worlds. Night fell across the system, though in space, darkness was eternal. The stars shone cold and indifferent, yet one truth had begun to emerge. The humans, survivors of a harsh and unforgiving world, were proving that hope, intelligence, and endurance could challenge even the mightiest forces. On Karos, Jerk stood on the deck of the Resolute for a brief moment looking at the stars. "This is only the beginning," he said quietly. "They think the Kravari are unstoppable. They are wrong. Humanity does not give up. Humanity survives. And today we have begun to prove it." Back on the Virelian bridge, Admiral Creel felt something he had not felt in months: confidence. If they can fight like this once, perhaps we can survive the impossible. Perhaps the stars have heard our plea after all. And in the dark reaches of space, the Kravari realized for the first time that the humans were not ordinary. They were unpredictable, relentless, and terrifying in ways the galaxy had not seen. The Deathworlders had arrived, and their battle tactics were rewriting every expectation. The first major confrontation ended without full destruction, but the message was clear. The humans were here to stay. They would protect. They would endure. And they would not be underestimated. For the Virelians, the first taste of hope had returned. For the Kravari, fear had begun to settle like a shadow in their ranks. And for the humans, the Deathworlders, this was only the beginning of a war that would reshape the galaxy. The Virelian fleet had held the line, but the Kravari were far from defeated. Over the past weeks, the humans had proven themselves beyond legend. Every strike the enemy launched was met with calculated defense, every trap was countered, and every vulnerable world was protected. Yet now, the Kravari had gathered their full strength for a final, decisive strike. From the bridge of the Resolute, Commander Jerk Thorne studied the sensor readouts. The Kravari fleet had combined multiple divisions, bringing massive warships, heavy weapons, and advanced fighters. The numbers were overwhelming. Their intent was clear: total annihilation of the Virelian worlds and the humans who dared defend them. Lieutenant Mara Voss, standing beside Jerk, narrowed her eyes. "They've learned from us. They are sending everything they have. If we don't act now, we could lose everything we've fought for." Jerk nodded slowly. "Then we give them a fight they will never forget. Humanity does not break under pressure. We adapt, we endure, and we protect. That is our strength." The humans had studied the Kravari's patterns for days. They had discovered weaknesses in coordination, reaction delays, and predictable targeting algorithms. With careful planning, they could use the enemy's own strength against them. "Deploy defensive formations around the Virelian homeworlds," Jerk ordered. "Scout groups intercept any incoming fighters. Heavy cruisers form layers to absorb energy attacks. Protect every world." On the Virelian flagship, Admiral Creel marveled at the humans' calm command. "They do not panic, they do not hesitate. Every move is precise. If there is hope, it comes from them." The Kravari arrived like a tidal wave. Energy beams tore through space, fighter squadrons swarmed like locusts, and massive ships moved to bombard the planets below. Yet every attack was countered with human ingenuity. Fighters darted between asteroids, leading enemy ships into gravitational traps. Heavy cruisers rotated and repositioned to absorb energy blasts, protecting entire fleets. Lieutenant Voss led a squadron to intercept a cluster of Kravari bombers heading for a planet with millions of Virelian civilians. Her squad moved with surgical precision, weaving in and out of enemy fire, using debris and asteroid fields as cover. Within minutes, the bombers were disabled or forced to retreat. Back on the Resolute, Jerk coordinated the fleet. "Divide the enemy forces, draw them into the center of our formation. Do not overcommit. Protect the weak first, then strike." It was a dangerous game. The humans were outnumbered, but every move they made caused confusion among the Kravari. Their attacks became chaotic, their formations breaking apart. For the first time, the invaders realized that victory was not guaranteed. Meanwhile, Virelian engineers watched the humans adapt technology in real time. Human ships modified shields, redirected energy flows, and adjusted targeting to counter attacks. Each decision was quick, decisive, and deadly effective. The Virelians whispered to one another in disbelief. "We have never seen anything like this. They are perfect warriors, yet they fight with purpose, not rage." Hours passed. Battles raged above multiple worlds simultaneously. The humans coordinated every strike, every defense, every maneuver. They saved countless ships and civilians, often placing themselves in direct danger to protect others. On one critical planet, a Kravari dreadnought moved into orbit, its weapons capable of destroying cities in seconds. Human fighters swarmed around it, drawing its fire while heavy cruisers moved into position. Using a combination of precise attacks and calculated feints, they forced the dreadnought into a trap. Gravitational anomalies created by nearby asteroid fields slowed it, making it vulnerable to concentrated fire. In minutes, the massive ship was disabled. Admiral Creel watched, amazed. They do not fight for revenge, they do not fight for glory, they fight for survival and for others. That is something we have never understood before. The Kravari, realizing their main weapons were being neutralized one by one, sent reinforcements. Their flagship, a massive vessel larger than any human or Virelian ship, moved to the center of the conflict. Its weapon systems were the most advanced in the galaxy, capable of destroying entire fleets with a single strike. Jerk Thorne studied the flagship. We cannot take it head-on. We need a coordinated attack hitting weak points while defending all others. Timing must be perfect. He sent instructions to every unit in the fleet. Human fighters split into precise formations, creating diversions and drawing attention. Heavy cruisers moved to shield vulnerable Virelian worlds. Advanced tactical drones jammed enemy sensors, causing confusion among the Kravari commanders. Lieutenant Voss led a daring strike team directly to the flagship's side. They moved with precision, avoiding heavy fire and targeted critical systems. Explosions rocked the enemy ship, forcing it to maneuver unpredictably. Every strike was calculated, every move deliberate. From the Luminaris, Admiral Creel watched the humans act like shadows and storms combined. They were relentless, yet controlled. They did not seek vengeance. They did not celebrate destruction. They protected, adapted, and endured. The Virelians, inspired by the humans, joined in coordinated attacks for the first time. They followed human strategy, using intelligence and planning instead of fear and panic. Together, humans and Virelians formed a shield and spear that the Kravari had not anticipated. Hours turned into a full day of combat. The Kravari flagship was severely damaged, smaller ships were destroyed or scattered, and morale among the invaders began to collapse. What was supposed to be a decisive strike now turned into a desperate struggle for survival. On Karos, Commander Jerk addressed his fleet over the communication channels. We have survived the first wave, but the enemy is not defeated. We must remain vigilant, protect every world, and fight with precision. Humanity does not fail. We adapt, we endure, and today we protect those who cannot protect themselves. Lieutenant Voss added, every world we save, every ship we protect sends a message. Survival is stronger than destruction. Hope is stronger than fear, and we are here to prove it. The Kravari, now facing the unexpected resistance, realized their previous victories had blinded them. Their arrogance had led them to underestimate humans. They had assumed the Virelians were weak and alone. But together, humans and Virelians proved a force stronger than numbers, stronger than technology alone. By the end of the battle, the Kravari were forced to retreat. Their fleet, though still large, had suffered significant losses. Entire planetary systems had been saved. The Virelians, exhausted but alive, looked upon the humans with awe and gratitude. Admiral Creel approached Commander Jerk personally. You have done what we thought impossible. You have protected our worlds, inspired our people, and shown us strength we never knew we could have. Humanity, Deathworlders, you are more than legend. Jerk shook his head. We did not come for praise. We came because it was necessary, because survival matters, because some things are worth protecting. That is all. Even as the Kravari retreated, the humans remained vigilant. They knew the enemy could regroup. They had seen firsthand the devastation the invaders could bring. But for the first time, the Virelians understood that victory was possible, not because of raw power, but because of courage, intelligence, and endurance. On the bridge of the Resolute, Jerk looked at the stars. This battle is over, but the war is not. We will continue to protect, we will continue to endure, and we will ensure that the galaxy remembers humanity does not yield, humanity survives, and humanity protects. For the Virelians, this day became a turning point. They had witnessed the true power of the Deathworlders, not in raw strength, but in will, ingenuity, and unbreakable resolve. Their hope, nearly extinguished, now burned brightly. And somewhere in the cold depths of space, the Kravari understood that the humans were not just another species to destroy. They were a force the galaxy had never seen before. Adaptable, relentless, and terrifying in their precision, the Deathworlders had arrived. The battle was won, but the promise of humanity weighed heavily. Every life saved came with effort, every maneuver required discipline, and every strategy demanded thought. The humans had shown the galaxy what it meant to survive impossible odds, and the cost had been high. Yet they had endured, proving that the stars themselves could bend to those who refused to yield. The Virelians whispered a truth they had once believed impossible. The galaxy would never forget the Deathworlders.